interesting. I want to pass along my colleagues to ask questions.
So, Ursula, you said you have a background in social work. So, how did that prepare you to interact with others? What did you take from that experience?
I mean, you can do so much with a social work degree. I mean, as you heard, like I worked with, in foster care, and I just being around other social workers and working part time when I was in college. I looked around, and all the people had this MSW, so I thought, okay, maybe that's the degree I should go into, and it'll prepare me. I enjoy working in this field. I was working with youth, transporting them to appointments. Youth that were in foster care. We would take them to appointments, help them, tutor them in their home. And I thought I like working in this, with this population. I like helping people. So then naturally, it helps you be, the schooling helped me become like a better communicator, better listener, develop some of those skills to be able to, interact with people and ask some questions and find out what they're going through and kind of be empathetic to their situation and help them out with different, services and resources. And that's what I think, the military students in the college setting need, that support. And as they're readjusting from their, military experience into the civilian world. So that all those skills that I learned in the social work field, obviously helped me support the students I was working with. I mean, it's such a great degree. You can work with in so many different settings. I worked in a hospital setting, just helping people while they're going through a difficult time, being supportive. And the military students, that's what they're going through when they're coming back to the college setting, is they don't know where they are. They haven't done this for 10, maybe 5 years, or, it's overwhelming. It's, they feel like they don't belong in that setting. So it's like, I'm here not necessarily as a social worker, but in the position that I'm in, I'm able to use my social work skills to help these students like readjust into the civilian setting.
Yeah, so going off of that, and got military, went right back into college. How was that transition? How was it being in such a disciplinary space where they tell you what to do and they give you the orders versus now creating the orders yourself?
Well, I think that's, the military is a total institution, hierarchy, right? You know your place by your rank. You all have the same mission or goal. The military is its own culture, own language, own dress, right? So that, and so choices are made for you, and you give up your choices in a sense, and some freedoms to serve, and that's the point. And then you get into a higher education situation where it's freedom of choice, right? Choice is encouraged. And I mean, I'm sure you heard this when you were in, like, to be successful in the military, right place, right time, right uniform. Yes, that's it. And so many things are done for you where, when I got to my unit in Germany, they gave me a checklist. Go here for this, go here for this, go here for this. And they sign when you get there, so they know you've done all of it, and they assign you someone. And so everything is taken care of for you, right? Housing, where you're going to shop, what your healthcare, you don't have to pick. You don't have to pick a doctor. Everything is provided. And then you get out and you decide what class, right? An advisor asked, and I think the power of choice is it's hardest for folks to get out of the military and then transition into higher education, because there's a lot more, power in you making your own decisions. And that could be a little overwhelming, right? So I think for some students, like for me, I went from being a very bad student to being, on the dean's list, right? Like with a double major and a minor and straight A's, because I was very focused. Because coming back, I'll make that 8 a.m. class. I'll be there. Even if I'm sick, I'll be there. I'll do all my homework. So I think in some ways, like those, service members and veterans tend to be great students, right? Because they've got that kind of discipline. But then at the same time, it's, you're sitting next to someone who's falling asleep in a classroom. And in the military, it would be your job to hit that person and wake them up. And, we joke about civilian cultural competency, telling students, like, don't touch anyone. Like, or if faculty think you're a veteran, like, oh, that person should be a leader. Like, obviously, so where leadership in the military is very different than leadership in the civilian world, right? Someone tells you to do something, you do it. It's an order, right? Whereas here, right, you have a lot more choice. So I think that's one of the biggest transitional issues for student veterans, is that, like, all of a sudden all the choices.
So you guys also have like certain choices too, like the discipline side from the military brings in a little bit of discernment. Choose, like, is this really gonna benefit? Like ending up at 8 a.m. for your classes, like that kind of discipline being involved versus like civilian students who might struggle more with getting up at that early time. Just how is it with your other with other people in the military? You see them also trying to get back into college after they got out, or
So I think it depends too. I went into college to finish my undergrad before the post 9/11 GI Bill. Now, the post 9/11 GI Bill, which is legislatively passed in 2008 and implemented in 2009, was the most generous GI Bill since the original, which happened after World War II. You know, for the post 9/11 GI Bill, most of our students use, it covers tuition for most at 100%, and it gives them a living stipend, right, while they're in school, which makes it possible to go back to school. Before that GI Bill was, and it's still around, but Montgomery GI Bill, Chapter 30, and I used that in my undergrad. So there weren't a lot of veterans where I was because that wasn't a great GI Bill. It's a monthly stipend. And if you don't have the funds, right, we're talking about on average, the national average of a veteran going back to college right now is 33. So you're more likely to have children, you're more likely to be married, and more likely to be independent, right, and working full or part-time while you're enrolled. So that makes it challenging if you don't have that additional income, right, or support to pay for school. I was really lucky. My father let me move back in with him for no rent for me to go back to college. And if he hadn't done that, I wouldn't have been able to do it, right, because that GI Bill wasn't that great. So when the post 9/11 GI Bill passes and gets implemented, the VA reported an increase of 43% in attendance, right? People using it. Now, was it because it was so generous? In large part, I think so. It's also, if you think 2008, the economy crashed and people were looking for retraining. So I think people took advantage, like, utilized the GFL, fortunately, to go back to school, to get retrained, to figure out what to do next. But sometimes with veterans, too, they're here for a new career, right? Not necessarily for a traditional college experience. And that's another transitional issue, right? Because a lot of students here at 18 are here to be on their own, be independent, where these folks already have that.
I don't think that it was so much of a change. We've always had a reading problem. There's always been a reading problem, right? COVID did not unveil this great big reading problem. COVID unveiled the access and accessibility, right? That woke us up. But we've always had a problem in this country with reading, going back to anti-literacy laws. So I just want to preface what I'm about to say with the fact that our brains were not wired to read. We have to teach it to read, right? It does this great thing, right? It rewires itself, right, to form pathways for reading to develop. A lot of people don't understand that. It's very different than language. Language, you can put a child in a room full of people who are speaking and they will speak. You don't have to teach them how to talk, right? That is not going to happen for reading. You cannot sit someone in a room full of people who are reading, whether they're reading out loud or silently. It's not going to happen. You have to teach it to read, right? That starts very early. What we think is reading starts in kindergarten, and then we build these habits in kindergarten. And if we think that, we're 5 years already behind, right? Reading starts really at the moment of conception. How? Well, all of the stuff that mom eats, all of the environmental pressures and stress impacts the developing brain. Reading is all about the brain. The brain is the main character, right? And so if we understand that, then we have a point of reference. And so how do we build stamina, right? Because in order to learn to read and read well, you have to build stamina. I'm like, this is a race, right? Not for the quick athlete, but it's endurance. And it took us years, decades to get here. My book has only been out since August. It's not going to take months for us to get out. And so people have to come to the point where I came to and say, okay, I reflected, now I see, and now I'm going to do better. When you know better, you do better.
It's time to create.
Exist. I'm trying to coexist. Exist. Yeah, I'm trying to coexist. Exist. I'm trying to coexist.